All right, you have a question here. You are given a table, consumption. You've been given consumption here, and you've been given utility. Utility measures the satisfaction you get whenever you consume a good or a service. So, for this scenario here, when you consume zero goods, you don't get any satisfaction. When you consume one of the goods, you get a satisfaction of 100 utils. You consume the second good, you get satisfaction of 180 utils. Consume the third unit of the good, you get 230 utils. So as we can see here, as we are consuming this good, our satisfaction is increasing. Now, when we get the fourth unit of the good, our satisfaction becomes, our utility, which is our satisfaction, becomes 250. All right. Now notice, when we go to the fifth good, our satisfaction has stopped increasing now. It has stayed stagnant. Yes, we consume the the fifth good, our utility, which is our satisfaction, has remained stagnant. It's still at 250 here. When we consume the sixth good, we notice that our satisfaction, which is our utility, starts to reduce. So as I'm going to solve this question, I'm going to illustrate to you the law of diminishing marginal utility. All right. So the first question here is explain the term marginal utility. So marginal utility, anytime in economics, whenever you hear the word marginal, it means addition. All right. So marginal utility is the additional satisfaction you get when you consume an extra unit of the good. Okay, let me repeat that again. The marginal utility is the additional satisfaction that you get when you consume an extra unit of a good. Right? That's this term marginal utility. So in this question, part 2, which says determine the marginal utility values, you're going to see how we get our marginal utility. So anytime in economics you hear the word marginal, just think additional. You're going to hear a lot of marginal things. Marginal production, marginal cost, marginal benefit. All of those, it just means the additional. If it's marginal productions, the additional production for producing one more unit. If it's marginal revenue, the additional revenue from selling one more unit. If it's marginal utility, the additional satisfaction you get from consuming one more unit. So we're going to make a table and then we tabulate our marginal utilities. So in order to get your marginal utility, this is the formula that we're going to use. Marginal utility equals change in utility over change in consumption. So let me make a table so I'll show you how we'll be calculating these values. So change in utility over change in consumption. So let me make a table. Let me use Microsoft Word because this board is misbehaving. Yeah, so this is the formula we'll be using for marginal utility. The change in the utility divided by the change in the consumption. So let me explain what happens here. First, in your table, you're going to list down the consumption from 0 to 6. And then you're going to write down the utilities from 0 to 220. Then you're going to make the third column for your marginal utility. So let me explain how we get the values for the marginal utility. So when there's zero consumption, there's no satisfaction. So the utility is 0. So there is no marginal utility. So you leave it blank here. Now, when we change consumption from 0 units to 1 unit, and our utility is going to increase from 0 units to 11 units. So what you're supposed to do, you record the new utility, which is U2, and then the initial utility, which is U1, okay, it's all about you get the new value and compare it against the old value. Then we get also the new consumption, which is C2, and the initial consumption, which is C1. Excuse me. So you will list them, but the more questions you do, you don't even need to list your U2 and your U1. All right. So when we say change in utility, what we're saying is U2 minus U1. And when we say change in consumption, it is C2 minus C1. So throughout this table, that's what we're going to be doing. You get your new utility, you call it U2. Your old utility, you call it U1. So similar with consumption. So we want to calculate our marginal utility, which is the additional satisfaction we get when we move from 0 consumption to 1 consumption of 1 unit. So U2 in this case is 100. U1, the initial utility was 0. So you're going to say 100 minus 0. Divided by the new consumption, which is C2, is 1. The old consumption, that is C1, is 0. So 100 minus 0, that is 100. 1 minus 0, that is 1. So the marginal utility in this case is 100 units. Okay. So from 0 units, when we consumed our first unit, the additional satisfaction we got from consuming our first unit is 100 UTUs. Yes. Any questions before I go further? So here we're moving from 0 to 1. Okay, let's now see when we increase our consumption from 1 unit to 2 units. Okay, so we come to our table. come to our table. So we're moving from 1 unit to 2 units. So in terms of consumption, our C2, which is our new consumption, is going to be 2. This is what you label as your C2. Then C1, which is the initial consumption, is going to be 1 unit. Then we're moving from 100 UTUs to 180 UTUs. So our new utility is going to be U2. And from our U1, which is our initial utility, is 100. So to get our marginal utility, as we said, change in utility. So you say U2 minus U1 divided by C2 minus C1. In this case, U2, which is our new utility, is 180 units. U1, which was our initial utility, is 100 UTUs. Then C2, which is our new consumption, is 2. C1, which was our initial consumption, was 1. So 180 minus 100, you get 8. Could you mute your mic? Could you mute your mic? You're getting feedback. Yes. So here, when we increase our consumption from 1 unit to 2 units, our utility increases from 100 to 180 units. So the additional utility that we get when we increase consumption from 1 unit to 2 units is 80 UTUs. That's the additional satisfaction that we have got. Any questions before I move to the next part? Now, one thing you need to notice is that consumption is increasing in units of 1. So throughout our calculations, our denominator where we're getting the change in consumption is 1. Okay. So really, even this you can just calculate it just by looking. Okay. But in the tests and exams, you need to show these workings. Right. So now we are increasing consumption from 2 units to 3 units. So it means our C2 now becomes 3. And our C1 becomes 2. And then for our utility, since we moved from 2 units to 3 units, our utility U2 is 213. And our initial utility was 18. So we're now trying to get the marginal utility when we increase consumption from 2 units to 3 units. What is the additional satisfaction that we get? So again, we use the same formula here. U2 is 230. That's the new utility. U1 is 180. C2 is 3. C1 is 2. So 230 minus 180, that should be 50. 50 divided by 1, 50 divided by is 50, yes. So when we increase consumption from 2 units to 3 units, our utility increases from 180 UTUs to 230 UTUs, which translates to an additional satisfaction of 50 UTUs. Okay, when you increase consumption from 2 units to 3 units, the additional satisfaction you get is 50 UTUs. Okay, so now we are increasing consumption from 3 units to 4 units. So C2 becomes C4. C2 becomes 4 and C1 is 3. And then our new utility is 250 units. Our initial utility is 230 units. Okay, so now I want to find out what's the additional satisfaction that we get when we increase our consumption from 3 units of this good to 4 units of this good. All right, so our U2 is 250, our U1 is 230, C2 is 4, C1 is 3. So 250 minus 230, that is 20. 4 minus 3, that is 1. 20 divided by 1, that is 20 UTUs. So the additional satisfaction that we get when we increase consumption from 3 units to 4 units is 20 UTUs. Now, you can ask any questions, colleagues. I need to know that we are following. Do we have any questions? Okay, okay, well, that's wonderful. Okay, okay, so now, so as I said, mm, we're now moving from 4, increasing from 4 units consumption to 5 units, consuming 5 units of this good. So our new C2 is this one, is 5, and our C1 is 4. Okay, then our U2 is 250, and the U1 is still 250. Two 50 minus 250, 0. 5 minus 4, that is 1. So 0 divided by 1, no addition, no satisfaction. Okay, when we moved from the 4th to the 5th, we do not get any additional satisfaction. All right, and let's see, when we move from 5, if we move from consuming 5 units to 6 units, all right, our new C2 is 6. The initial consumption was 4, I mean, is 5. Now notice here, our total utility has started reducing. Okay, because throughout this question, as well or as we were increasing consumption, as you can see on this table here, the utility was increasing. All right, but the marginal utility has been decreasing from the start. Okay, if you've noticed, from the time we started, our marginal utility is just decreasing from 100, 80, 50, 20. Now we are on 0. And here we're expecting now a negative utility because our U2 is 220 and our U1 is 250. So we can see now that even now the total utility has started to reduce. So this is where I wanted to introduce the law of diminishing marginal returns. Let's just calculate this. So 220 minus 50, 250, that gives you negative 30. 6 minus 5, that is 1. Negative 30 divided by 1, you get negative 30. Right? So the law of diminishing marginal utility states that as you consume more of one good, eventually your utility will start increasing, but there's going to be a point where your utility is going to start reducing. The more of one good you consume, eventually your total utility is going to start reducing. Okay, so with the law of diminishing marginal utility, where you want where you if you want to know where the law starts, the law of diminishing marginal utility starts where the marginal utility starts going down. When you see a decrease in the marginal utility, that's where the law of diminishing marginal utility begins. Okay, according to this law, the more of one good you consume, eventually your total utility will reduce. That's just a simplified version of the law. All right. So whenever you see the marginal utility start reducing, that's where the law of diminishing marginal return starts. So in this case here, the law of diminishing marginal return started already, because from the first, our first marginal utility was 100, then it goes down to 80, then it goes down to 50, then it goes down to 20, then it goes now into a negative value. So I want to illustrate the relationship between total utility and marginal utility. Once you understand this relationship, that's how you understand this law. Okay. So this is how they're related. When marginal utility is increasing, in this case, we never had a scenario where the marginal utility is increasing. All right. When marginal utility increases, total utility increases at an increasing rate. All right. Then, initially, when marginal utility starts to reduce, when marginal utility decreases, at first, total utility will increase at a decreasing rate. Okay. When marginal utility starts to decrease, total utility starts it will increase at a decreasing rate. Meaning, when as it's increasing, it's not going to be increasing as much as it was when the marginal utility was increasing. So initially, when marginal utility decreases, total utility increases at a decreasing rate. Then eventually, as marginal utility starts to decrease, total utility decreases. Okay. So if you can see in this here, as we can see here, at first we had an increase from 100 to 80, 180, increase of 8. 180 to 230, increase of 50. 230 to 250, increase of 20. So as you can see, as marginal utility is decreasing, total utility is increasing at a decreasing rate. Okay. Because if one did say total utility is increasing at an increasing rate, maybe from 180 you find you go to 300, from 300 to 500, from 500 to 700, that's increasing at an increasing rate. But as you can see, the increase in the utility is in small parts. It's increasing in small parts eventually until it reaches the point where total utility just starts decreasing. So this is very important that you know the relationship between these two. Okay. And the law of diminishing marginal utility, which states the more you consume of a good, eventually your total utility will increase, but to reach a certain point where your total utility starts decreasing. Yes. Any questions?